switch places with him, and he'll use my screen.
And who is this?
This is Derek from Senate
Okay.
Game Bar.
Okay.
Use your name.
All right, I will call this Tigard City Council and Town Center Development Agency Board meeting to order. And roll call, please.
Youth Councilor Calderon.
Here.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
Councilor Lube.
Here.
Councilor Anderson.
Here.
And Mayor Snyder.
I am here. Please all join me on your own. Mute yourselves and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Okay, thank you, Mr. Nolip. Council or staff, any non-agenda items?
Mr. Mayor, staff have no non-agenda items tonight.
All right. Public comment. We've received some written public comment. They were due by 4:30 p.m. today. And then calling questions will be taken via telephone for agenda item 3C as well. The public may call in now to get into the queue. And the call-in number is posted on the screen, 503-966-4101. City Manager Wine, do you have any follow-up to previous public comment?
I have no follow-up to previous public comment, but for tonight's public comment, if the council would like an update about the status, I can provide that at the time that works for you.
Okay, so the written public comment, we'll move to that. The written public comment that we received, I believe we received one in writing, and it was related to the location and permit for the farmers market. Is that correct, Deputy City Recorder Patton?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and City Manager Wine, is that the one that you're wanting to provide information on?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Council, I just wanted you to know that the Hillarys are they're property owners in downtown on Tigard Street, and they are providing public comment tonight about the operation of the Tigard Farmers Market, which is on Sundays, and have concerns that include access to their building, trash, the way the market operates, and foot traffic that comes across their property, and potential damage that are concerns of theirs, and they wish for the market to be moved. So they've asked for a response to this by Thursday, and I plan to provide it. So what I guess I'd like the council to know is that I signed the permit for the market to operate on the public street and right-of-way, and found that the market satisfied the requirements for the use of the property every Sunday. So I've let the Hillarys know already that moving the market is probably not going to be an option, but we're going to try to address the concerns that were raised about any other effects that the market operation is having on their business in the response I provide. So just wanted you to know that we've received this. I've let them know I'll respond by Thursday as they've asked.
And I would assume, but I don't want to assume that you are connecting with the market management team as well.
I am.
Okay.
Actually, the market manager made initial contact with the Hillarys to try to work through concerns. And yes, we're working together with the chamber and the market
Okay.
to see what we can do.
Thank you very much for that update. Is there any phone-in public comment on, and I will get Derek from Senate, but I want to get any phone-in callers first. Mr. Nolop, do we have any callers?
Mr. Mayor, at this time we do not have any callers.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, you want to put Derek from Senate on?
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm broadcasting from my office downtown. So he's my neighbor. He just wanted to use my feed. So that's how that's working.
Thank you.
You can, yeah.
So used to
Hi,
using
Derek.
that.
Hi,
Hi,
Derek. Good to see you.
good to see you. I'm Derek from Senate Board Game Bar here on Main Street.
We
I'm,
can all hear you.
Perfect. I'm attempting to apply for the permit for the sidewalk and the for outdoor seating. So I'm hoping that's something that goes through. I think I have to do a little bit more on my form. But I'm also going to be applying for taking over parking spaces. I don't know if the city is allowing that, but we're just trying to think outside the box to keep Senate going. I know that a lot of businesses around here are just trying to do what it takes to get through this. I'm also going and creating a GoFundMe to help my business survive. I'll be working with posting that on the city's website, but any social media outlets that I could add to is all a benefit. We all have a lot of followers, so I don't know if that's something that the chamber, I'll be reaching out to the Downtown Alliance as well.
Well, thank you for letting us know. I know we all have an interest in trying to support as best we can all of the businesses downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And yours is certainly a unique and interesting one that people really enjoy. So thank you for that, bringing that to downtown Tigard, and hopefully we can. It doesn't sound like you're having necessarily any trouble with the permitting for the outdoor seating. You wanted to let us know you're proceeding with that, and if you do need support from any of the city staff, feel free to reach out and connect with them. I think the appropriate contact, City Manager Wine, who would the appropriate contact be if Derek needed help with the permit for outdoor seating and perhaps a discussion about the parking spaces? Question.
I would suggest that any one of the three folks who help support us with downtown. I'm sorry, on the permit. I want to thank Brian Rager for quickly stepping in and correcting me before I said anything. Our assistant city engineer, Joe Wisniewski, is the right person to talk to about the permit process. And we do have downtown staff who can also help you navigate that. But I would start with our assistant city engineer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Derek, anything else you wanted to share? Otherwise, thank you very much for your time tonight.
No, I do think the owner of Curiosities, Travis, has been doing an amazing job of getting the word out there that there are businesses out here and alive and going just fine through Main Street. So he's doing a great job of marketing as well. So any support that folks can give him to get the word out that we've got a vibrant or getting vibrant downtown Main Street community would be amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to, Mr. Nolop, did we end up with any more callers or any callers?
We still do not have any callers in the queue, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is to consider a resolution to extend the city's emergency declaration. City Attorney Rahala.
Good evening, Council. This is your 4th extension of the emergency declaration related to COVID-19. It is exactly the same as the last one and extends the emergency until the end of September 30th, 2020.
Any discussion or questions or a motion?
Counselor Lube, I move to approve resolution number 20-41.
Counselor Newton, I second.
Been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the ordinance.
Resolution number 20-41, a resolution of the City of Tigard extending the city's emergency related to COVID-19.
City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
Counselor Newton.
Yes.
Counselor Lube.
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
And Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Okay, resolution number 20-41 is adopted unanimously.
All in host. Show recording is on.
All right, so the City Council will now convene as the Town Center Development Agency for the next two agenda items. Item number 5 on the agenda is a TCDA board review of project plans for the Overland mixed-use development. Mr. Fairley.
Good evening, Chair Snyder. I'm the directors of the Town Center Development Agency. My name is Sean Farley. I'm the city's redevelopment project manager. And tonight we're presenting the project plans for the Overland mixed-use development, and that's what we formally refer to as the 72nd and Dartmouth project on the corner of 72nd and Dartmouth. Per the terms of the development assistant agreement, the board is requested to review the plans for consistency with the Tigard Triangle TIF district plan and also the project description that was in the development assistance agreement. So this agreement was signed May of last year. The board authorized the signing of the development assisting agreement with Dartmouth Development Partners, LLC, and the agreement committed redevelopment assistance to pay for $1 million of the system development charges that the project will incur. And the project will incur a total of $5.5 million in STCs and related fees. Did I show you some of the project plans right now? So this is a is going to be breaking ground very soon. There will be 219 market rate apartments, a mix of 1 bedrooms, studios, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And there'll be 8,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor, and 220 some parking spaces. The construction of this $70 million project is going to be a major milestone in the Triangle revitalization efforts. And it's projected to generate about $16 million of property tax over 35 years. Here's a couple other views of the project. Maybe a little small for our screen, but kind of gives you a sense of the scale here. And this is a kind of looking top down. So the parking is largely hidden from view. The building's on some podium parking, and it's going to be 6 stories tall. So probably the tallest building in the Tigard Triangle. And John Olivier and Nick Diamond are in on this meeting, so if there's any questions about the specifics of the project, they'd be happy to answer. But generally, staff finds that this project is consistent with the TIF plan and recommends approval of the project plans.
All right, Mr. Fairley, does that conclude your presentation on this?
It does.
Okay, City Council, who has questions or comments? Councilor Anderson?
I have, I've been watching this project, and it's in a perfect spot. It's going to have some retail on the side, of course, some housing for seniors, it's a great project. The plans look great. And I suppose, Sean, do you need a motion for tonight?
Well, the what's requested is review and comments, and basically, do you find this project? Does the board find this project to be consistent with the Tigard Triangle Urban Renewal / TIF district plans?
Well, I, for one, would say yes, and I would approve of the plans.
Councillor Lube.
Yeah, I don't have any questions regarding the project, really. I'm excited for it to kick off. I'm excited for the retail space underneath and to see what sort of businesses can go in there and really revitalize that area.
Council President Goodhouse.
I agree with the comments. It's going to be a great addition, and I think it's really going to kick off the area. A great use of some of the money we're putting towards it. But a perfect project to get bodies down there. Anything to activate an area. We really need the people living there, the bodies, that mixed use. So this is going to be a great project for the area.
Councillor Newton.
I don't have anything to add. I think it'll be really beneficial and, great to get some housing down there. And so, yeah, I don't have anything to add other than that. Thanks.
Mr. Fairley, given what I'm seeing here, I'm going to guess that they're planning to use the vertical housing development zone based on the design. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So another project that's being helped by that plus taxing. I mean, this is, I guess I want to just make the observation that, many years ago now, the council and the city leaders had the vision to try to make a place where these kinds of projects would happen, and using all the various redevelopment tools that exist. And I feel like this is a huge one that is using all those tools and is the result of a lot of work by actually probably hundreds of people, not the least of which are our hardworking staff. So I want to acknowledge that, and then I am supportive of the project. It meets, I think, all of our goals and is using all of our tools. So I'm glad that the project's moving forward. Do you need anything else from us, Mr. Fairley? And actually, Youth Councilor Calderon, I'm sorry, did you have any comments or feedback?
No, I think the project looks fantastic, and I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fairley, do you need anything else on this particular part of this agenda item?
I do not. I just would like John Olivier, who's on the call, to say, is there a date set for the groundbreaking?
Yeah, hi. Just wanted to say thank you so much for council's support of this project. Honestly, we really couldn't have done it without your support. It's been hugely helpful, pretty much on every avenue. City staff has been fantastic to work with. Everybody on our side is very pleased and very thankful for the help and the support. Currently our groundbreaking, we are slated to close our construction loan on August 6th, and we will be breaking ground immediately following that. So we expect there to be shovels in the dirt by somewhere around August 10th would be our best estimate of actually seeing activity on the site.
Great.
Awesome. Okay. We'll move on to item number 6, TCDA board consideration of an Estoppel agreement with Dartmouth Development Partners, LLC. Mr. Fairley?
Thank you, Chair Snyder. So this is for the same project, the Overland. We're requesting board authorization for the TCDA Executive Director to execute an Estoppel certificate related to the Development Assistant Agreement. And the request is coming from the project's construction lender, which requires this type of document for loan closing. And you may be wondering, if you're watching at home, what is an Estoppel certificate? It just clarifies the rights of the lender in the event of a foreclosure on the project. But since the city investment of $1 million in SDCs is contingent upon the development of the property as proposed, that money would not be available should the lender pursue a different use or a different development of the site.
All right.
Okay.
Does the city attorney have anything to share on this?
Council or board, I would just say that we have negotiated this with the Lenders Council, and we feel confident that this protects the interests of the city.
All right. Are there board questions or a motion?
Councilor Anderson, I move to authorize the executive director to execute the Estoppel and recognition agreement with Dartmouth Development, LLC, on behalf of the TCDA.
Council President Goodhouse, I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote.
Director Goodhouse,
Yes.
Director Newton,
Yes.
Director Lube,
Yes.
Director Anderson,
Yes?
Chair Snyder.
Yes. Okay. The agreement with Dartmouth Development LLC is adopted unanimously. We are now going to reconvene as the City Council for the remainder of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is item number 7, City Council.
Yeah, it is a little confusing, but the Urban Renewal Agent, the TIF District, the Town Center Development Agency, is a separate legal entity from the City of Tigard. And for this Estoppel certificate to be executed, both the City Council and the Board of the TCDA need to take action.
Okay. City Attorney Rahal, anything more to add?
Nope, that covers it.
Council, a motion?
Council President Goodhouse, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the Estoppel and recognition agreement with Dartmouth Development LLC on behalf of the city.
Councilor Newton, I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Council President Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Councilor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Anderson,
Yes?
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Okay, the agreement with Dartmouth Development LLC is approved unanimously. Let's move on to item number 8, which is a review of City Council goals. City Manager Wine and the leadership team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tonight, let's see, even though this item is titled Report on City Council Goals, this is the time of year when I usually would be bringing you a quarterly report about progress on City Council goals. And I'm going to be broadening from the usual report that I would give you. And I've brought with me all of my friends on our city leadership team tonight because our hope is to have a dialogue and discussion with you about both the status of our city council goals, how that looks for making goals and city priorities in the future. And also the next item on your agenda is about the anti-racism plan and racial equity and city actions. And I think as the leadership team and I were talking about how we might present this, we thought that it would be useful to have the broader discussion. So we have 2 goals in our presentation tonight, and I think we have about 10 minutes of presentation, but really would like to get into a dialogue and discussion with you to discuss citywide priorities, how council goals fit within city priorities, and also what it means for council goals for the future. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that our whole leadership team is with you tonight, and now I'm seeing that Mr. Wyatt was going to share his screen, and I think that might not be working. So I'm going to ask for help from Kent Wyatt. We just have 2 slides I was going to speak to.
Yes, I'm loading them up right now. Should be up here in a second.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep saying some things, and then we'll see if our slides come up. So on Saturday, over the weekend, I sent the council a memo that outlined the discussion that also follows kind of the discussion that we want to have with you tonight. And really, it's about a look ahead to what our city priorities should be right now. My goal with that memo, although it was long, was not to overwhelm you, but to show you that we have a lot of efforts and projects underway in the next 18 months, including some imperatives. That's what we've been calling them. They are major issues and priorities for the future that have inserted themselves this year, 2020, that we have to address. Those imperatives include calls for action on racial equity, implementing a proposed new strategic plan with vision and priorities, and adapting services as we continue to address COVID-19 and our ongoing response. So in addition, some of the themes in the strategic plan, such as our city services building planning and implementing the performance audit recommendations, including major system replacements for asset management and financial systems, are critical system changes that we have to put in place to be ready to improve and grow. So even though the memo that I sent you is long, it was meant to point out a few things to you and summarize for your discussion some themes from all of this. One is, as a city, we want to and we need to be strategically aligned, and the proposed strategic plan helps us to do that. I hope you also took away from the memo that each department has a lot to work to do. And when you blend together what we know we'll be working on in the next 18 months, plus what the council may want to accomplish, I'd like to have a dialogue about how we can be sure we're realistic about what can be accomplished and adequately resource those efforts to provide time and staffing to achieve this. Also, Mayor and Council, I've heard you say during the budget process and since that we're going to be spending a lot of time on this related to a couple of things, including the Transformation Commission and the calls for racial equity, and also our continuing COVID-19 response. So this discussion tonight is really meant to confirm what our priorities now that are necessary. I'm going to pause because I think on the presentation side of things, I want to check and see what's showing. I'm not seeing slides, but if they're showing up, then...
City Manager Wine, I think they're showing up on people's desktop.
I don't see any slides.
Okay.
So, Kent, this is Mike. If you unshare this and then share screen 1, you should be able to get that for everyone.
City Manager Wine, did you have more than these 2 slides, or are these the 2 slides?
I just have the 2.
Okay, so while I would like everybody to be able to see the slides, but I think the other thing that would be helpful, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything, is the staff, as I read this discussion of the 2020-2021 city priorities, there were at least 2 places where the staff were recommending an adjustment to our goals and or the timelines of them. Are there more than 2 adjustments, or am I right that one is on page 4 and the other on page 7, that where there's a suggested? I guess I want the council to be clear on. I know that's not the only ask, but those are 2 specific asks and suggestions from the staff, and I just want to make sure the council's paying attention to those.
I was just going to say a few words about the city council goals, and I had not planned to go through them in detail. Okay. But okay. I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, that you're calling out that there were 2 adjustments that were called out, I believe, by our community development director and staff about ways we could adjust those goals for the future. Or let me double check with you if I could. You wanted this to be called to the council's attention?
Well, I just want to make sure it's part of the discussion, because I would anticipate that if you are, if the desire is to get a have the council consider a change to the goals, that should at least be part of what the council's thinking about tonight. So that's the only reason I wanted that teed up.
I appreciate that. I think if I have just 1 or 2 more minutes of things to say, and I think once you hear that, you'll also hear that what the leadership team is suggesting to you is actually a much bigger change than a few changes to the current council goals. So, and that's what I think will be the source or the subject of some discussion. Usually with city council goals, you would be setting them for the 2 years that the 5 of you would be serving together. So back in January of 2019, you set the current council goals, and we're nearing the end of that time, coming into the end of 2020, for the goals that you set back in 2019. I mentioned that I've briefed you recently back in March, and then since then quarterly, about the progress on the goals. I had not planned to go through each goal and objective, but given the memo and the way that we walked through them, if you have, there's plenty in that memo that if you want to talk about it and ask questions, we can absolutely do that. And yeah, so what I was going to do was highlight some of the major accomplishments that have come from council goals. That includes the development and approval by our voters of our local option levy. There are a host of downtown projects and areas in our triangle and our city center where those projects have moved forward. I think I'm seeing slides getting shared here in a minute. Please let me know. Our other council goals, there are 5, but I would say that there are some related to communication, and Bull Mountain annexation and Ash Street crossing are the 3 objectives where we were not able to make as much progress at this point on achieving council goals as everything else. I would say the rest of the council goals, including growing in a smart and inclusive manner, enhancing two-way communication, and that has come in large part from the council's commitment to be out and listening and involved in the community, and also enhancing walkability. All of those goals have been well underway, and we've made a lot of achievements over the last 18 months in the time that since you set them. And so I'm going to keep going, even though I'm not seeing slides, but if you are, then that's that's great. So we also are right on the cusp of a refreshed strategic plan. And the way that we briefed the council in the memo that I referenced from the weekend is that we've been working over 2019 to refresh our citywide strategic plan and public input and feedback about that plan is ongoing now in the month of July. We have a proposed vision that has concepts in it: becoming a more equitable community, becoming a more walkable community, becoming more healthy and accessible. And so I'm also not gonna go through the memo in great detail, but as I said, if you have questions or you want to highlight them, that would be great. What I'm bringing you tonight, and the leadership team is here to talk about too, and if there are slides up, I'm hoping we're moving to the one. I mentioned that we feel like there are imperatives. There are some things that have come along that can't help but be our priorities going forward. We feel as a leadership team that those imperatives are clear. They are the things that have key intersections that cross departmentally, and they're going to consume a significant amount of time and resources over the next year. So if we were suggesting to the council what you should be thinking about related to goals for you to consider, what we feel as a leadership team that the city needs to do now is clear to us. And because your next item is about racial equity, when I hand this off to the leadership team, we're going to be talking about the Anti-Racism Plan 2 to get your feedback. But as I make these initial comments, I think what I want to do is call out to you. I'm just rolling up from the memo that I sent you over the weekend to say, we believe there are 4 major priority areas that we should deserve focus from this point forward. One is improvement of our systems. That includes putting together a way of communicating where we can be more proactive and more systematic and provide more support to you as you are out in the community and we're hearing from constituents, hearing from the community. And I mentioned earlier that we have major system replacements in the form of our financial systems and our asset management systems to go through. It's going to be a major project that will take multiple years to go through. Also, our city services buildings and facility planning those are areas where system improvement it needs to be a priority going forward. I just mentioned the strategic plan and the concepts that are in the vision. I think that there are some key elements of the strategic plan that include equity that we'll be talking about more tonight. We are still responding to COVID-19, and it looks like we will be continuing to do that in the for the we don't know how much farther in the future we're going to need to, but in terms of thinking and rethinking our work and what it means for us to be providing this work, we've had to necessarily think about what we're doing very differently as a result of responding to the pandemic. And then finally, this is the next item on your agenda, but I think what we're going to do is sort of take this in concert with the city goals and the priorities conversation. The idea of responding to the calls for racial equity include the Transformation Commission proposal, which you've all discussed most recently and will be going forward, and also the leadership team has come up with an anti-racism action plan. So the staff is bringing you tonight the areas that we believe deserve focus and priority going into the future. And as you look at council goals for the future, what we would like to offer you are the priorities that we see before us that are going to need to be addressed and take all of our attention and resources to get done in the upcoming next 18 months. So we still have day-to-day challenges and need to get the things done in a new way, and that will be shifting as well. But I thought one of the things that we could do in addition to offering to you these priority areas going forward would be to dive into the anti-racism action plan, and the rest of the leadership team members have some brief presentations to also give you just to set up this conversation. So I'm going to hand it to our library director, Halstead Bernard, to talk about our anti-racism action plan.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and city councilors. It's my pleasure to be here with you tonight. I am Halstead Bernard. I am the director of the Tigard Public Library, and I'm going to be speaking with you and introducing our discussion of our anti-racism action plan. So, as Marty said, you received a very long list of ongoing and upcoming city priorities, and we'll have time to discuss those and delve into those later on. We want to take some time right now to highlight our anti-racism action plan, why it's needed, what we're doing and already, and what we will be doing. So first, just so we're all on the same page, we need an anti-racism action plan because we know that institutional racism exists in cities, and we know that we as leaders help to perpetuate it. So developing and working through our anti-racism action plan will enable us to clearly identify how institutional racism exists in our city, in our policies, in our procedures, in our programs, in our services, in our things that harm our Black, Brown, and Indigenous community members. So once we have identified what needs to change, we do the work to change it. And you've heard this before. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Some of this work is already in progress, some of it has already been done for a long time, and some we have yet to do, and it will take years to complete. Some of it we will be doing our whole lives. But it is some of the most important work that we will ever do, and it is the legacy that we will leave here in this city. The time is absolutely now to move this forward, and we are absolutely committed to becoming an anti-racist organization for the good of everyone who lives and works in Tigard. So I'd like to start first what we will do as a leadership team. How do we accomplish this massive undertaking? First and foremost, as leaders, we will hold ourselves accountable. Each member of our leadership team has made a commitment to do this deep personal work that serves as the foundation for all of the rest we will set out to do. So we were discussing this as a leadership team earlier, and Brian Rager, our Public Works Director, shared something about this personal work. And I'd like to ask Brian to share that with all of us now.
Thanks, Halstead. Good evening, Council. Brian Rager, Public Works Director. As Halstead said, we on the leadership team are all at various points in our journey learning about racial injustice and equity. And like I said, we're at various points of that journey. And the more I read, listen, and watch information about these important issues, the more I am convinced that it has to start with us. We hear that a lot, that unless the leaders of the organization are bought in and are well educated on these issues, we don't have a prayer in leading our organization. So I will just tell you, for me personally, I feel like I'm still in the beginning stages. I'm certainly doing work on this, but I just want you to know that I've got a ways to go. But I know for my department, I need to get further in my journey before I can lead the Public Works Department well in this area. And I'll just echo something Halstead said. I'm very much committed to this work. But one message we wanted you to hear is that as leadership folks, we need to be on this. And that message was hammered home to us this morning. We had a speaker at our leadership team, and I wrote down what she said, and she said, you can't lead an organization before you do the deep personal work. And she also said, start now. So we've all started, but we have a ways to go. So while we are all doing our own work in this arena, I don't want you to think that there hasn't been work already. And we want to tell you about some of the efforts that have already been going. And here to talk about those efforts are Commander Jamie McDonald and Human Resources Director Dana Bennett.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Council. Jamie McDonald from the Police Department. The Chief is gone this week, so it's my pleasure to join you and talk to you a little bit about something that the Police Department has been doing, and to get a little bit of history for you on where we started our journey, and just a simple one for you. So we use cultural competency questions throughout every part of our hiring process for all of the positions in the police department. And it's a simple step, but what it does is it helps us to identify people that have that level of understanding that we're looking for and that the community deserves. So that's just a small piece of what we look for in people that come into your police department. Of course, there's many more things that we do, but as an example, that's something we've been doing. We started that around the first part of 2018. So it isn't new. We've been doing it for a few years, and we started that with intention, working with HR specifically to make sure that we're asking the right types of questions. And that was all part of the DEI initiative as we really started to incorporate that into our process. So I'll move forward to Dana.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Commander McDonald said, obviously, we started this DEI working in DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, working in this space a little over 2 years ago. And one of the things that we uncovered pretty early on in the process was that, I think I've shared this with some of you, that we found that our candidate pool did in fact mirror our community, but our hiring and selection did not. And so one of the things that we put in place just last March, so we've just got a little over a year of experience with it, is we changed our recruitment process to a blind recruitment process, where there is no candidate information, not address, not name. All candidates are converted to a numeric system. And so the hiring manager is screening based on a numeric system, really based on knowledge, skills, and abilities as demonstrated on an application. And there's no other information on there. So it's called a blind recruitment process, and it's intended to eliminate any potential implicit bias in the process. So we put that process in place in March of 19, and the change that we've seen, whether it's related to that or not, we can't know, but the change that we've seen in Tigard over that period is we've moved from about 10.5% of diverse city staff to about 12.9 during that time. We've got lots of other ideas that we intend to initiate over the next few months, and I'm sure that we'll grow and develop additional new ideas as we move forward in this work. But we're excited about the opportunity to make real change in Tigard. And I'll pass us to Kathy Nyland. Thank you.
Turning on my video. Hello, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is Kathy Nyland, the Assistant City Manager. In addition to what we've been working on, we're ready to move from ideas to implementation. As our action plan indicates, some actions are short-term, while others require a more long-term plan. Identifying what is needed to be successful is a very important step we need to take. We've heard about the need for education and the personal work that we want to do, but there's more. For years, decades, centuries, we have built systems to get the results we want. During this journey, we need to declare the results we want to achieve. We need to define equity. Having a clear understanding will help us create an equity lens or a racial equity lens. Our future actions will be guided by that racial equity lens, as other organizations, including the Tigard-Tualatin School District and the City of Seattle, have adopted those toolkits. So what does this mean? It's a tool used to pivot, changing how we think, how we operate. It's about changing our culture. It's a tool for transformation. This lens we will wear as we look at our policies, our programs, and our projects and practices, and change them to be anti-racist. By understanding equity and embracing that lens, we'll be asking ourselves some very important questions. Who was at the table? Who was not? Who doesn't even know there is a table? Who has access and why? Who doesn't and why? Who was benefiting from our actions? Who was impacted? Who was hurt by our decisions? What are the barriers, the obstacles, and how can we turn those into opportunities? We believe that everyone has a voice, and it's our job to listen to those voices. You shouldn't have to be the loudest or the most frequent to be heard, because all voices matter. So what can we be done? So what can we do? Lots of things, as our action plan indicates. This work will be hard, and it will be difficult, and it will be awkward, but it's needed. We won't always get it right, but our only failure is not trying, and we are trying. As Dana talked about, we are working on hiring and recruitment processes. Toby and his team are working on refining our RFP contract process, and Kent and his team are working on how to make outreach and engagement more inclusive. So with all that said, we know this issue is important to you. I'll stop now, because I'm sure you're all tired of hearing from me, and we would love to hear your thoughts and reactions and input on what we're proposing, our plan. So thank you for your time and attention.
So can I clarify, City Manager Wine and/or Assistant City Manager Nyland? It seems like one of the fundamental asks or questions, now that you framed this, is the slide that had the 4 areas of focus. is one of the questions sort of to the council, like, do we agree that those are the things? I mean, that seems like it's kind of one fundamental question, and then a specific discussion on the anti-racism action plan. Are those? I mean, that can take a lot of discussion tonight, but I want to make sure that do I have us headed on the right track?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thanks. We recognize that it's going to take a lot of discussion, but we wanted to offer those things up so that the council could discuss and give us feedback on both.
Okay, so I'd like to help with the process here. I'd like us to start with, are those 4 categories the right things? City Manager Wine, is that an okay place to start from your perspective?
Sure, we'd welcome your about that.
I can't. Do I dare ask you to try to put it back up on the screen
so
everyone can see it?
Yes, we'll get that back up for you.
Okay, I'm sorry. But I think this is kind of a really critical question, so I want to make sure everybody's looking at it and being thoughtful. And then, City Manager Wine, the other tie to this would be the couple of things undone and are not on this group of 4 are the things that in the priorities memo kind of were pointed out as things that might be delayed or fall off for now. Is that accurate?
Yes, although I would say, so actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Asher to help me with there are a couple of suggestions that were made about changes to existing council goals, but I would say that the 3 areas of accomplishment of council goals that we have not been able to get to are citywide communications plan, outreach for Bull Mountain annexation, and downtown Ash Street crossing and branding for downtown. And what you'll see in this 4 priority areas slide that I would say is incorporated in our suggestions or our thoughts about or our offerings about goals going forward is that that communication goal carries over.
Okay. Thank you, City Manager Wine. So, did you feel like you need to go to Kenny, or are we okay with that understanding?
I feel like we've let council know sort of where we are on that. If Kenny has more to say, that's.
I think we should. Thanks. This is Kenny. I think you've got it, and I think we should keep going. And when it's time to come down to the specifics of those particulars, I'm prepared to share my thoughts with council.
Sure, Asher. Okay, so council, be prepared. I'm going to be calling on each of you to give your input on and your reaction to the suggestion that these 4 priority areas with the subsections be the things that we refocus on, and that would likely shift some council goals and or redirect priorities of the city. So let's start with Councilor Lube.
Yes, thank you. And I also appreciate, because anyone who's listening in doesn't have access to the memo that we were sent, so having the information of knowing kind of the areas that we're talking about shifting is really helpful. I like the ideas that are on here, just as far as shifting in thought process. One of the things that, I think we've focused on a lot is our COVID response and our Transformation Commission in the last couple of months. And I was really looking for the ability to continue to pivot in such a way in which we are looking at continuing to serve the Tigard residents and work on the goals. And I made this comment earlier, sort of the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time as a city, for us to be able to focus on those goals, but also continue to work on development of the city and progress and moving forward. So I think that's really important for us to continue to also shift in the other direction. One of the things that I will say is certainly for 3 and 4, we're working on those. 3 is obvious contingent upon how this continues to develop, and we certainly don't have a crystal ball for that. But four, I would say also moving forward in a very thoughtful way, and also with the understanding that I think my personal expectation is not that this is all going to happen within a month. So to make sure that we're planning it out in such a reasonable way in which we can continue to focus on those other areas of the city as well, and thoughtfully work towards all of these different issues. I would also agree, just as far as the Bull Mountain, just that it's probably something that I think was a nice to have with our council goals, and it's something where other things have taken priority. So I agree with that. One of the things I'm honestly kind of torn with is the city services building and facility planning. It's something that's sort of been nagging at me for a little while, and I know it's something that, you know, we're looking at trying to consolidate and make these changes. I just continue to wonder if it's the correct time to be doing these sorts of things with everything else going on, if there should be anything that should be prioritized above it, and just looking overall at the general environment out there with everything going on, and just making sure that it's the smart thing to do to continue to plan. And I don't have an answer to that, but I'd just be curious on other councilors' plans. But I think as far as implementing our performance audit, replacing the asset management and financial systems are really going to move the city forward. And so I think that's an important area to focus on. And I'm excited about the new strategic plan. So all of those things are great.
Thank you, Councilor Lube. Youth Councilor Calderon.
Yeah, just like Councilor Lube said, yeah, I think that this plan is great, but I would also like to see, I know that we've been focusing on 3 and 4 a lot recently just because they're the most prominent things in everyone's everyday life, but I think that, as she said, we can also walk and chew our gum at the same time, just because we should also be focusing on priorities number 1 and 2, and I think something that Kathleen Nyland hit the nail on the head with was making sure that everyone knows that there is a table that conversations are happening at. And I know our city is doing fantastic with communications, and I know that everything we're doing is fantastic, but just making sure that everyone knows what's going on, because I know we all read the emails from people who have questions that already have answers somewhere else in the city, so making sure that our communication system is great, which it already is, but just improving upon it would be something I would be interested in seeing happening.
Thank you. Council President Goodhouse.
Okay, the mute button's always so hard to get off. I was going to address the question raised by Councilor Lube. I think, and this might be discussed by staff later, but the city services building, even though it seems like a big lift right now, as far as I recall, that's also a time-sensitive matter where I think that we need to be focusing on that. So I agree that maybe it was too much with everything else we're doing, but also with the time sensitiveness of that, if that's something we need to focus on, then it should stay in there, along with anything else that may be time sensitive that we want to make sure that we don't forget about. I agree with all these. I hope that number 3 would really kind of focus too on the business side of Tigard, and making sure that we're doing what we can to help businesses to thrive or track the continued growth of business or the support of businesses. And I think that's kind of reopening can be between just reopening in general or reopening for businesses. And I think with the Bull Mountain discussion, maybe that might just fall into some of the spark conversations or some of the council outreach we're doing that I don't know if that's ever going to turn into a time-sensitive situation with Bull Mountain, but if we kind of still keep that in our back pocket of somehow just reaching out to them and still talking to them, especially with what's going on in the River Terrence area, it might be good still for us to at least have some kind of outreach with them. And one thing I was going to mention, though, and it's kind of came up some meetings with being equitable, is kind of more of a definition what that is and make sure that we're on the same page. I view that as if something's being done if we're implementing, find some way, either through grants or processes, that it makes it equitable for other people. Not the other way where we exclude doing a project or an item because it's not equitable to all, but instead find a solution that we can make it so people can fall into that or can get that same benefit. And I think another part, through looking at the different areas and reading through it, one thing I just was jumped out at me, and I don't know if this fits into these or not, but when we're talking about homelessness or affordable housing or things like that, one thing I've kind of seen pop up in the nonprofit world is really the smaller locations. There's like Just Compassion, Family Promise, so forth, that are looking for a residential home here or there where they can do services for people. They can do overnight shelter or things like that. So I think a lot with our focus, we look big picture with affordable housing stuff, but we don't have anything smaller, kind of lightweight, cheaper that would be some options. And so I think that might be something we throw in there. And I'll just jump on this one part because Assistant City Manager Kathy Nyland brought it up about the RFP process, but I did a meeting last week with Black-owned business owners, and they were talking about part of the process through the RFP that really hurts minority-owned businesses a lot of times is the process of lowest bidder wins it, or do you hit a lot of the metrics where maybe businesses that have been around for decades can fall into the RFP process where new businesses that are minority owned don't fall into. And during that call, they referenced a 2-page document that Portland's put in place that has gotten rid of that process of being the lowest bidder, and it actually be able to go off of skill, quality of jobs, and it's been able to open it up to a lot more. So it's something where the person that was leading that conversation is on vacation afterwards, but I sent him an email to get more information on it and a way we can look at the RFP process to take a look at more minority-owned businesses that maybe were disadvantaged with the way the rules were before to be able to now bid on projects. And the only thing I would I think is, and I see it, it's kind of falls to the council goals, is that in the future for the walkability of ever circling back around of some kind of a bond measure out there to take some of these areas that might be disadvantaged from being able to walk through the neighborhoods and look at some kind of a sidewalk gap program or something that we can get more of these areas filled in. And that's all I have for right now.
Councilor Anderson.
Well, the priority ideas are what we're looking at for the next 6 months. Are we actually just going to redo the council goals, Mayor? Is that the plan here? Or are we just going to integrate these with what we've got already? Because really, goal 1 was about the levy, and that is gone, so we can skip over that. We've already considered an excise tax for construction.
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Anderson, I think to answer your question, I think that the city leadership team and the city manager are sort of proposing, like, these are the priority areas, and if we agree with this tonight and provide, our feedback as a second step on the anti-racism action plan, what I would envision happening is probably a goal-setting session in December or January as the new council is seated, where we probably look at these that we start from the place of these 4 priority areas and perhaps establish what the council goals are within these 4 priority areas. I haven't talked to the city manager about that yet, and I want to get her input too, but that's where I think this goes, is that this would be the framework from which we're working. And if we bring things up that aren't in these 4 categories, they're probably not what we're going to focus on.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So I agree with the 4 priority areas, obviously, and as staff time dictates, they get to plan long-range transportation and everything that we've got outlined as well. So but obviously 3 and 4 have to be considered right now. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
City Manager Wine, did you want to clarify your thoughts about the goals, or did what I say make sense? And
What you said, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you said summarized where I thought we were also going.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Newton.
Okay, so you're not talking about making a change immediately. You're thinking when we get the new council elected, as we typically do in December, we would take these priority areas and then develop the goals, council goals out of these 4 priority areas. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and I guess I would say the mayor said something important, which is that in terms of resourcing what we do and making sure we have the capacity to do that, I think you're hearing the leadership team bring you a message that says that we these are major areas of focus that we believe we should be aligned with the council on.
And we would develop them further in December. But we know going forward, this is what we're going to focus on. Okay. Okay, with that as the background, now I'm going to change a little bit what I was going to say. I think, I'm just going to go through really quickly, communicating well means everything goes well. So I think anything we can do, we continue to improve. I think looking at communication through the equity lens is important, but I wholly support that first bullet under number 1. I think we do need to continue to look at the city services buildings. I'm a little bit concerned when we get 6 months out in terms of where we are with COVID and what's going on with our community there. I'm a little concerned, but I don't think it's prudent at this point to stop the planning. I think we need to continue there because we don't know, I don't think, where we're going to be, say, in January. Replace the asset management and financial systems is important. I also think another system that we need to look at, and maybe this is getting down into the weeds, but is our parks and our parks maintenance. That's an important asset. That's an important system. So maybe as we develop the goals further, we can take a look at where that would sit. But that's something that would, I think we need to have a discussion about. And I'm hoping as we develop these goals that the staff will incorporate, there was a note in some of the materials that the city manager provided about how we've had to put a hold on doing the department work plans that reflect the performance audit recommendations. So that might be down in the weeds, but I don't want to drop that thread either. I'm more comfortable with number 2 now that we're talking about doing something in December. I'm a little concerned that we're in public comment period and we're already talking about implementing the strategic plan. To me, as a community member, that feels a little bit like we've decided already, so a little bit nervous about that. I do support it, but and I think when we get to the other side, that's the direction we'll be going. But I want to encourage folks to continue to comment on that so we can get as much feedback as we can. Obviously, COVID-19, that's got to be a priority right now. We don't know how long that's going to be with us. I also think it's important to look, as I think we've done a good job in the past, looking at that through an equity lens. I think trying to think about, the business community and some of the minority-owned businesses and trying to assist them where we can. Looking at some of the rental assistance and some of those things that we've done. I think continuing to respond through the equity lens will be important. And then I think in December, I agree, this anti-racism plan and the Transformation Commission, that's critical moving forward. It isn't a sprint, as somebody said, it is a marathon. And looking over the staff anti-racism plan recommendation, I think we need to really focus on, short-term, mid-term, long-term, because it is going to be an ongoing discussion with the community and changes that we're going to need to make, especially work we can start now. I can't remember which staff member said it, but looking at all the services we provide and making sure that those are provided equitably. So that's important work to begin right now. So with that said, and with the understanding that we're talking about developing these further in December, I would support the priority areas.
Councilor Newton, I will just add to at least a little bit of clarity to my perspective on the strategic plan. The staff are suggesting that these be our priorities, and implementing the strategic, what we're getting feedback on in the strategic plan is feedback to it that may modify the plan,
right?
But that does not mean that like it's going to be implemented the way it is now. But I think the staff are calling out that whatever the final plan is, our focus needs to be on implementing it. At least that's, so I don't view that totally as a disconnect, but I understand your point. I think that the comments made by all 5 of the other members of the city council cover everything I was going to say and more. So I am going to move us to, if the city manager is okay with it, she and I are trying to co-facilitate this discussion. So if she's comfortable with that discussion, then I want to transition us to the anti-racism action plan. City Manager Wine, what are your thoughts? Do you have any follow-up questions?
I don't think we have any follow-up questions. We appreciate you considering these priority areas and just sort of, thinking about the future direction. So it sounds like there might be one more comment.
Yeah, Council President Goodhouse.
So I have a clarifying question after the other councilors spoke. Where, not exactly off of goal 2 that we had before, but where really does the economic growth and the community vitality, as far as really focusing on our urban renewal districts or expanding those, or making the triangle an area that people want to come to, or downtown, or really focusing on that, where does that fall into those, or does it fall into any of those 4 priorities, or is that something that's we still want to make a priority? And also it's including Southwest Corridor and all that, because that chunk.
So Council President Goodhouse, I guess I would redirect back to the discussion about priorities and how much is on the, if you look at the 11-page memo, there's all kinds of stuff that's going to continue and work that has to continue and is still important. We are not saying, I don't think we're saying, nor is the staff and the leadership team asking us to say, this is the only stuff we're doing. It's that these are the big picture items that we're focused on, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen anyway. I mean, even if we said we're deprioritizing Southwest Corridor, which I'm not saying we would, but if we did, then, we still have all the work that's got to be done on that anyway. The staff have all that work. And the Southwest Corridor fits into, healthy climate action, equitable and accessible, walkable. I mean, it does fit into many of those things. So.
Okay, I just wanted to see where that is. I didn't presume that we would stop pushing for any of those areas, but I also wanted to clarify that to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean,
discussion.
Yeah, I think it is fair, though. Again, I've hit it a couple times, but I'll acknowledge the things that, because of COVID and where we're at with our rapidly changing priorities, there are a few things that were on the council goals from 2 years ago that are likely going to get not completed and not much more attention probably in the short term. And that's also what I hear the leadership team and the city manager asking us to acknowledge and agree with. So
agreed. Okay, thank you.
All right, so City Manager Wine, how do you want to handle feedback on the anti-racism action plan? Do you want us to go section by section with individuals? Do we want to let each individual go all the way through? Do you have a suggested approach to this, or do the staff have more of a presentation on this?
Well, part of the reason that we embedded the anti-racism action plan comments from leadership team was so that you could hear our thoughts and approach to the draft that you see. And I would say we'll emphasize the same thing that we did a couple weeks ago when we talked to you about this effort, which is what you're seeing are first thoughts about how we'll go forward. So I didn't have I know that we wanted to get your feedback about what we're proposing here. And I guess I would leave it to the council.
Okay.
But I hope that the comments that the leadership team made earlier, you'll take into account. I think the level at which we're considering changes in every department is something that we want you to know that the Transformation Commission is an effort that you've worked on the scope in some depth, and we believe that the Anti-Racism Action Plan is an and, that the review of our services and the equity lens that we'll develop will allow us to take a look at everything we're doing differently. So.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest to the council that we let each counselor speak and go all the way through. I mean, if you've got written comments, instead of going by section, there's, I think, too many sections to make that be a logical approach. So let's try it that way if you're willing. Youth Councilor Calderon, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So when I was reading this plan, I was really impressed with how detailed and how fantastic this plan is overall. Something I would love to see a little bit more focus on is just because I personally love reading, is in the library. I'm not sure if there's already a section like this because I haven't been to the Tigard library in quite some time due to COVID and because I have a closer library near to me. But I think it would be fantastic and incredibly important if there could be a section dedicated to learning about racism and learning about other people's perspectives of life, and books like White Fragility and all of that stuff. Having a section like that in the library would be extremely beneficial to everyone, just because lots of people probably would not search out those books specifically, but if they saw them, I feel that a lot of people would go out of the way to read them. But yes, that's all the comments I had for the anti-racism plan. I did read over all of it, and I think that was one of the bigger things that stuck out to me.
When the library reopens, what about having that section be right at the front of the library where there used to be the, the new reads, or I don't know, there's all the catchy stuff up front. Maybe that should be there, just an add-on to your idea.
Yeah.
Maybe a learn about other people kind of section or okay. Thank you, Youth Councilor Calderon. Councilor Lube.
Yes, thank you. Once again, I want to acknowledge all of the work that the leadership team has put into this, and I'm especially impressed with the acknowledgement of how much work I think we all have to do on a personal level in order to understand the institutional racism and to really work on this anti-racism plan. One of the things that I referenced earlier I think is really important, and some of these sections really go into a really great short-term, mid-term, long-term, I think, is to make sure to sort of do this with everybody, just to be able to plan out and see what we're doing with timelines. Again, I don't have the expectation that all of this, we're going to snap our fingers and all of a sudden everything is going to be perfect. And so I think having a reasonable plan and an action plan just as far as the timeline is really helpful. One of the things, again, that I'll bring up that I appreciate is bringing in a third party to help us review things. But the other thing that sort of struck me is long-term, as far as continually evaluating our process, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism. I don't agree that, maybe we don't think this, but it's not clear in this plan that once this work is done, we're finished. It's something that should be continually ongoing. And the only thing that I think would be really helpful to see is maybe some citizen input and I know it's difficult in COVID times, so whether it be, a quarterly meeting or something like that, or maybe even a policy review committee where we have specifically individuals in our community who may have barriers, help us understand better our policies, because I feel like although we're doing all of this work, those of us who are in it don't necessarily see the barriers that other people have in order to access our services or our programs. And so to deliberately reach out to them and try to get that additional input on an ongoing basis, I think could be really helpful and really beneficial, because those are, certainly for me would be my blind spots. And so asking the questions and looking for the input from people who are really impacted by our policies, I think would be really helpful. But otherwise, that's the only feedback I have. Thank you for all your work.
Councillor Anderson. You're on mute, Mr. Anderson.
I too appreciate all the department's participation in this. The individual growth is something that's interesting. It's very subjective. I thought it was interesting, Brian Rager mentioned that he is not prepared to lead in this arena as of this time, but it's the accepting attitude that will lead to the growth. So that in itself, I think, is the leadership, that we can foster this attitude. I don't have any specifics on the action plan, but I thought it was well thought out, and we'll see how the committee brings it forth, but I thought it was very well done.
Thank you. Councillor Newton. You're also on mute.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah, I appreciated all the hard work too. A lot of details in there, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to get down into the weeds about each specific action. I agree with some of what's been said. I think it's great to have a third party. I also am struck with, as I read and listen to people, I continue to realize I don't know a lot and I don't have the experience, and so I'm wondering, is that as we move forward and we get to the process with the third party, it might be interesting to get their feedback on how we move forward. A committee, as Councillor Lube talked about, or what are we going to do? What are we going to put in place to make sure we continue to do this work, and we continue to make sure that we're addressing equity in all of our services and processes. So I was encouraged that the focus of the plan was to look at our processes and services and try to address inequities in those. So with that said, I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Council President Goodhouse.
You got to the mute a little quicker that time. I have a little more in depth on some issues. One, I was looking at the document on the third bullet for what we're solving for. During when the council did the discussion, we had changed the verbiage because I think that was taken from our document. So if leadership wants to emulate and do the same thing that council did and take that, change that sentence to fit the same way, that might just be an oversight that hasn't been adjusted yet.
Well, they were taking it from my original challenge, but I wish my original challenge had been revised probably to what the council came up with. So I hope this happened. That I would appreciate that revision as well.
And then I do have a clarification or maybe an understanding of how it works. We currently do a blind recruitment process, but then also is written in here that if there's with job openings, if a certain percentage of people of color are not met, then we would keep going or opening up. So how in a blind recruitment process do you also know what you're looking at, and how do you change that? Is that based in the scoring to know that you haven't done enough? I don't know if that's really a question that can be answered now, or if I can just throw it out there and we'll get a response later.
I'm happy to address it if you'd like me to now.
Yes,
go for
please.
it, Dana.
Okay. So in HR, we can review the application pool to see what kind of mix we have in the application pool before it goes to the hiring manager for screening. So once we do an initial screen for minimum qualifications and the pool is ready to pass to the hiring manager, we can then take a pause, pull up the actual data for what's in the pool to determine if we have a sufficiently diverse pool of candidates.
Okay.
So that information wouldn't go forward to the hiring manager, but once we've finished our initial screen, we can then look at that data and see if the final pool that's going to the hiring manager is sufficiently diverse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I figured there was something I just wanted to know, kind of get better understanding, because it seemed like they contradicted each other. So
it's a good question. Thanks.
And then my next one is it kind of refers to a call-out system, but I would hope we'd maybe have more of an in-depth process of how that works, whether or not be an anonymous way or through HR or more of a detailed way. Just knowing just how organizations work or so forth, it might be hard for someone to feel like they go to someone or talk about a situation that's happening in a department. So I think maybe a little more detail on that rather than going right to a supervisor, but other extensive measures that someone could point out problems that are going on. I would also like to see some kind of an option for the community to either be able to engage or replicate some of the processes that are going on in the city. The biggest thing I think a lot of us have been seeing from emails or citizen feedback is some people don't understand why we're doing this, what the process is. And I think the best way always is kind of like with the Police Citizen Academy. The best way if they're not sure what's going on in the city or the police department is to have them jump on a committee or jump onto a police citizens committee. If we're doing all this in the city, but maybe citizens don't know, if we have some way that we could also invite citizens that maybe don't understand or not sure to do the same thing, I think it'd be a great way to, as a city as a whole, tackle this. And that kind of leads into the one of the ones I saw, one of the bullet points was those being interviewed for the committee process. If they don't fall into it or don't really have an understanding, they're disqualified right away. I think in a way that might be unfair because there's a lot, I know go through this process, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. There might be something that before someone goes and interviews for a committee, maybe there's a process that the applicants can go through a quick hour training, watch some videos, have an understanding, so at least they know. Because you may have someone that's well-intended, but maybe they're not quite up to speed on everything that's going on. And that takes me to my next point is, are any of these processes being considered for our existing or for the future committee members? We have a lot of committee members, over 100 of them. Is this also going to be something that's going to be applied, these processes, to the committees as well? Since they really are the face of the city a lot of times, go out there talking to the community members and making decisions for the cities. Is that really being considered, or is that something we can add on to there as well? And then the last thing, kind of what I brought up in their section, but I think it belongs here more, is looking at the RFP process. If we can look at some way to change, so if there's a way to look at the way we work with vendors in general too in the city, and to make sure that the vendors we work with are following these practices as well. So not only is the city doing it, but anywhere that we do our resources or spend our time or money, that those entities are also in line with what we're doing or have that training, or maybe they have proof that their employees have gone through that training as well. Because if we have people out there doing construction projects or doing things, we don't want them interacting with the community that may reflect poorly on the city.
Council President Goodhouse, that's your feedback?
Yes.
Okay. Have I missed anybody? I want to make sure everybody's gotten to speak.
Could I just add one more thing, Mayor Snyder?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so just in my skim over the doc, I was just reminded about two last things that I thought were pretty important. One of them being the unpaid or lived experience to be considered experience. I think that would be quite important because I know a lot of people who are my age trying to get a job do experience the thing that's like, oh, you need job experience to get this job, but in order to have a job, so that is some type of system that is not in newcomers to a field's favor. And then another thing that I thought that was important is making sure for boards and commissions and then city positions are diverse, because as mentioned before, we do have the blind interview system, and even though the interviewee pool is diverse, not the hiring selection is not always. As a person of color, noticing that there weren't quite a lot of other people of color in the city staff was one of the first thing I noticed. So I think that that would also be quite important going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Calderon. I've got some specific things, and normally I think this topic is important enough that I want to provide all of those specifics verbally, even though maybe in some topics I might just hand some of this to staff, but I feel like the dialogue is important and the community has a right to hear all of our dialogue, so I don't want to just hand it off, but some of this may seem a little specific. I agree with Council President Goodhouse's comment about revising bullet 3. I think I already mentioned that. In the what we're solving for section, understand and acknowledge collectively and individually what white privilege means. I think that's certainly probably the most important part, but there's also other kinds of privilege, and I think that this may be a place where we should be. I guess it's a question. And probably a question for people that are more knowledgeable than me, and perhaps we don't even have members on the leadership team, given where all of us are on our journey. But I guess I just wonder, is there other privilege that we should be seeking to try to understand at the same time? I don't know. But when I read it and I'm thinking about long-term, big picture, that question just sort of came up for me.
Are you asking for a response on that, or? I wonder if that's something we could just
somebody can certainly respond, but I don't think there's anyone even in our meeting tonight that is qualified to answer the question. But go ahead, Council President Goodhouse.
I was just wondering if we found some, like you said, get more feedback on it, but if we just did something more of a term like privilege or terms like that, because like you said, it could be, it's not necessarily to that angle of just being white. It could be just privilege in general or other parts as well. So.
Yeah, what I don't want to do is minimize the fact that I think, white privilege is probably the most important, and so I don't want to minimize that, but I do want to ask the question about whether that's broad enough. Let's see. In the what we believe in section, leadership, bullet 2, it talks about listening to community, staff, and organizations. We will center their voices while we listen. What struck me there is just that I don't think listening is enough. I think we have to be in action-oriented mode too, but I also realize that listening is the most important part, and we shouldn't necessarily be the group figuring out in each case how to act. But I just wanted to point out that just listening, if we don't do anything, is not going to help in the long term. I'm now on page 2, leadership team, bullet 1, 2, 3, 4. Bullet 4, learn about experiences of our staff who are BIPOC. I again learn. I question whether that's enough. Might need to be stronger and more aggressive there. That's a typo. We can find that later. I'm not going to go over that kind of stuff. The last line on page 2, bias towards action. I think that's actually written, the perfect is not the enemy of the good. I think that's backward. I actually think it's based on what you're trying to say, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Seize the moment, I think. I'm now on page 3, City Council section. I'm wondering if we should be adding or modifying a city value related to this. So I thought that maybe should be in that area. In the city management, city attorney section, bullet 3, I'm wondering about whether removing barriers should, I made a note that removing barriers in that bullet is, I think, an important concept to be thinking about. Then I had lots of exclamation points, which means when I was reading it, I was really excited and happy. So that goes through page 6. Page 7, when we get to some of the public safety stuff, I think we should, I know this was drafted before the Transformation Commission, but there should probably be some reference and connection to that. Let's see. Page 10, community development section. This was one where I felt like this was very, like the bullets are all department focused, mostly. And I actually think there's a broader role that community development needs to be playing in and looking at our the design and function of our communities as it relate, like the whole city from a community development perspective. I know that's a much bigger topic, but it seems to me like the outcomes of our community in the long term actually are dependent and tied to the way we design and structure our communities, and that is community development's accountability. So I just have a comment there that I think that should be bolder, bigger, and be getting more at community outcomes overall and what role community development plays in that. And then just an acknowledgement that I was really impressed to see the thought that each of the leadership team members put into, I think Councillor Lube mentioned this too, maybe, excuse me, maybe others, just the thought that they're putting into where they're at and how they're individually acting. It, it prompted some additional ideas for me to be thinking about too. And then in some cases reinforced things that I've been doing recently that have been helpful to me and gave me new ideas. So I just want to thank the leadership team for being thoughtful and in some cases being vulnerable. I think we're all, we need to be, it's interesting. I'll make a statement about this. Change in yourself oftentimes comes when you're uncomfortable. Change doesn't frequently come from you being totally comfortable in your skin or in a situation. And so I guess I would just say as I'm reflecting on this, that we all are going to be and necessarily so need to be uncomfortable on some level as we're working through all of these very challenging and difficult issues. And I also reflect on a conversation. I called 2 or 3 residents back this afternoon before the council meeting, folks that were, some were really upset about just variety of things that would fit into the general approach that we're taking on anti-racism and on the Transformation Commission. And, there is a strong desire within our community to have constructive dialogues. And I think there's just, I was speaking with a husband and wife. She wanted to put me on speakerphone so the husband could hear and talk too. And, you know, they were coming from a position of, I think, really not seeing from their perspective, racism playing out locally. And we just talked through a few things, and their comment to me was that they just really wish there was a place in our community where we could start having dialogues and people could start learning more. And I thought that was very telling. So I'll just share that with everybody. It gave me hope. These were people in their almost 80 years old, and, you know, really profoundly concerned, and, you know, they don't think of themselves as racist and don't want to have to feel like they need to apologize for being white. And, you know, I tried to help them through processing some of that. But these are all very challenging topics, and it's going to take thousands of conversations like that between everyone in our community to help move both us as a city and community and as a country forward. So I'm excited to have the city of Tigard on this journey. And someone was saying it's more of a marathon and not a sprint. I think it's actually a sprintathon. I think it's both. Heidi will tell me that's not a thing. That's okay. I'm coining that term. It's a sprintathon. So we got to be able to move quickly, effectively, and be realizing it's going to take, you know, probably decades. If, you know, most of us will probably be retired or passed before this is at a point that it really needs and deserves to be. So I know I just spoke a lot. I'm sorry about that, but I hope that was helpful to some. City Manager Wine, do you have other questions about the feedback? I know we all just peppered the team with info. Actually, we should probably open it up to the leadership team too, if they have specific questions.
I do. This is Kathy Nyland, the Assistant City Manager. I pinged Marty to let her know. First, thank you so much for taking the time to read, you know, our thoughts and our suggestions and our approach. We did spend a lot of time working with each other and reaching out to our staff to get their thoughts and inputs reflected on this document. So thank you for, again, taking the time. And just to address some of the comments made providing clarification, this is a living document and it will constantly be evolving, just as, you know, we as individuals will constantly be evolving as we embark on this journey, and we'll be constantly assessing how we are doing. And that's the importance of really identifying and defining what equity is and creating and embracing that equity lens. So it's going to be ingrained in how we approach our operations and how we make decisions. And again, having a better understanding of our desired outcomes, and also paying attention and monitoring unintended consequences that may occur. So there is no start and stop point with this exercise. It's going to be ongoing for, you know, we are in this position because of actions taken over centuries. So this is going to be an ongoing effort to really change how we operate and changing culture. And it's a lofty goal, but it's a needed goal. And as far as listening, I totally agree with, you know, listening isn't strong enough, and it's there, but our thinking behind listening is doing how we approach conversations with community and creating a process or structure so people feel heard and know that we heard, and whether that's providing a really consistent feedback loop or explaining what the issue is, what we've done, what we've heard, and how that conversation influenced or impacted the decision, or explaining why it didn't and what we couldn't do. So all of those things are on our radar, and thank you for just sharing your thoughts and making this an even better document.
Thank you, Kathy. Marty, anything?
No, I think Kathy did a great job of summing up what we're we appreciate your review and your feedback. And I'm not sure if other leadership team members have any other comments, but we appreciate your taking a look at the plan.
So, Council President Goodhouse, then leadership team, be ready. Unmute yourself and be ready. Council President Goodhouse.
One thing I was just noticing when you're talking, Mayor, and I'm sure this will be fixed later, but some of these abbreviations are new words to people with BIPOC and things like that. So I just hope in future documents that we put in quotations what they stand for and what they are.
Good call out. All right, members of the leadership team who have questions or comments about things the council has shared tonight in reaction, anything, please speak up.
Hi, Council. This is Toby LaFrance, Finance and Information Services Director. First off, thank you very much for the attention that you've put into the proposals that we put in front of you this evening, and the attention to detail in your comments that you provided. I wanted to respond to one thing that Councillor Newton said, and she wanted to know what can be put in place to continue to do this work, make sure that this doesn't get lost. And one of the things, I'm sort of like Brian. I'm more in a early stage of this learning, and one of the things I have been learning is on this set at the top. Council, Mr. Mayor, you've been doing an excellent job of making this an important issue for our community and the organization that's serving it. So Councillor Newton, if there's something that you can do to make sure that this work continues, it's make this work a council goal and continue to keep this as an important goal for our organization.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you. Yeah.
I see Mr. Asher, you've turned, and Ms. Bernard, do you both want to speak since you've turned your cameras on? Okay.
Go ahead, Halstead. I'll go next.
Jenny. Mr. Mayor and City Council, I wanted to respond to a comment from Youth Councilor Calderon. I was so excited to hear you mention specifically how library collections and librarians might support our community in this moment of great learning. And I just wanted to follow up by saying that currently, while our patrons aren't able to be in our building and browsing our stacks or our new book displays like we do, we change these up every 2 weeks basically to make sure that these are fresh items for our patrons. We do have many e-resource lists available right now of e-books and e-audiobooks, and I wanted to mention some specific titles that are always available e-audiobooks during this time, meaning they're free to download and there are unlimited numbers of copies available, so they're always available to everyone. You don't have to wait on hold for them. There's Ijeoma Oluo's So You Want to Talk About Race, which is a book I recently read that's absolutely fantastic. Dr. Kendi's book about how to be anti-racist, and many more resources. And as soon as we're able to open those doors, I'm sure we will have display after display helping people find these materials that they need to educate themselves. I also wanted to note that because we have this new service that we're offering patrons, that patrons can walk up to our service desk outside. We have a big tent in our parking lot now, and patrons are more than welcome to come up to our librarian and say, hey, I don't understand this current moment in history that we're in, and I really need some help. And we would be happy to match someone with books on the fly at that moment. So I just wanted to go ahead and thank you, Youth Councilor Calderon, for mentioning this and allowing me to follow up with some resources that we do have available right now. Thank you.
Even though he's cheating on us with the Beaverton Library?
I wasn't even going to bring it up.
Mr. Asher.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder, and thanks to all the council for the excellent discussion tonight. I think on both the council priorities, which are city priorities, meaning they're ours too, and the anti-racism review, you managed to really give us the kind of guidance and review that we were hoping for on both. So I just want to say thank you for that. We're trying to convey a lot of information, as you know, through memo form and also presentation tonight. It's not always easy, and we appreciate the thoroughness of your interest. I just wanted to make one comment, and it's back to the exchange that Council President Goodhouse had in the middle of the discussion with you, Mr. Mayor, on all the other stuff. And what happens to the Tigard Triangle, what happens to the downtown goals, what happens to all that stuff. And Mr. Mayor, your response was, in my mind, perfect. I would have tried to have said the exact same thing, that we are going to continue to complete the goals and to even go beyond them, those that we already have been given by you in 2019. Those don't cease. We're working on a number of things, as you know, that are not related to any of your goals, and those don't cease either. And now these imperatives, which we're calling them, have to be fit in as well. And part of our message tonight, and it's not an easy one to share, is to let you know kind of where the brim is, where the top of the glass is, and we're there. I so appreciate you recognizing that those 4 priority areas that were on the slide really do need to be the framework for any future goal setting that you do if you want us to be successful on any of this. We didn't talk about climate very much tonight. We feel like we're behind. Climate justice and racial justice are very much intertwined. If we're going to be an anti-racist city and do that work and do it well, we need to give it our best, and that means that we have time to work on it in addition to everything else. And so hearing you recognize that, and I know I'm speaking for the whole leadership team and for the city manager, was very meaningful and very much appreciated. So thank you.
Other members of the leadership team, Marty, I saw you pop up in video. Do you want to? I'm using that as my cue now that people want to speak. So would you like to speak?
I am preparing for administrative report, so I can hold.
Okay. Any other members of the leadership team? Council President Goodhouse again.
I just had one other thought. I know we're doing a great job with social media as far as saying that we want to make this a priority or what's going on. But I thought it'd be great during this process if we can highlight examples of what we're actually doing. If we maybe highlight an example of one of our leadership team members going through a certain training, or what that training was, or some of the steps we're doing, or maybe throwing in whether it's a part of the report card or something, links to something that people can watch, or videos, or little tidbits. So the more we can kind of get it out there to show not only that we're doing this, but what steps we're doing, what resources we're using, so people can see those and know that we're not only just saying we need to do it, but actually seeing the actions and the progression going out there. I didn't really see anything in there. Maybe I missed it, or maybe that was part of the plan anyways, but I didn't really see anything in the document that really outlined kind of a social media interaction with the community of how to show that we're going through this and to kind of lead by example.
So kind of an outreach communications strategy.
Yeah,
overall.
Yeah. I think it's one thing to say it, but to actually see that we're walking the walk and what we're doing. That way, maybe the naysayers, they can actually see some of the processes we're doing. Maybe if they go through a certain training or certain books are being read, or there's 5-minute quick YouTube videos or something that we can put out there as part of our communication process, so it can slowly just seep out there into the community as far as what we're talking about and what resources, and so people can look at it. Someone may just hear the words, but if they see these little tidbits, they're more apt to just slowly look at it and understand what we are talking about.
So I trust that our communications team, I see Mr. Wyatt. Oh, he's joined us by video. Mr. Wyatt, would you like to comment?
Yeah, no, Councilor Goodhouse, I think that's a great point. And, you know, one of the things we often glean from those type of posts is some of the pushback that we have from the community, which is a learning experience and what people are thinking about our approach. So most of the time, even some of the negative comments are kind of a positive. So we can certainly look at being more intentional about that. I know with the Transformation Commission, we have got a lot of feedback on social media. And so I think people are, even during this discussion, we had a response to one of our Twitter posts about, you know, that's great you're having this discussion, but what specifically does this mean? What is equity? How will this play out in the organization? So I think that is something people in the community are asking, and something we can do a job at following up on.
Yeah, because everyone can learn, so that's great.
Thank you, Mr. Wyatt. Any other members of the leadership team? Okay, City Manager Wine, do you want to move on to your administrative report since we have no non-agenda items?
Yes. Thanks again, Mayor and Council, for your feedback tonight. We really do appreciate it. One of the things, Mr. Mayor, you and I talked about that I was going to touch on but didn't quite fit into the conversation, although it's very relevant, is I want to update the Council about the conversations we've been having with the school district about the school resource officers. And so what I want you to know is back in the beginning of June, Superintendent Ricky Smith and I spoke and acknowledged the concerns that were being raised by the community, in large part because of actions taken in other districts, such as Portland, but also concerns that were being raised by students in particular. And so what we're going forward with is a thoughtful review made of the role and the presence and the approach of school resource officers, using all the information that's needed to be considered. So that's going to include a review of data about interactions, referrals, discipline policies, and most importantly, the lived experience of our students and families, which I've mentioned before. This is going to involve basically listening circles with those who interact with the officers. And even though the city of Tigard and the city of Tualatin are the providers of the service, whether and how the service is provided and what it will look like in the future is going to be guided by the voices of the school community and the school district and board members. So in something resembling normal times, we would be finalizing right now our annual agreement with the school district to basically put the SRO program in place for the upcoming school year, and we would be naming our assigned school resource officers for the fall. And I want the council to know that I've advised Chief McAlpine that Tigard is not going to make that assignment or assign school resource officers until this thoughtful review is done. So we expect that the dialogue that I'm talking about may take until the end of October. This means that the officers who are usually assigned in an SRO position would be temporarily assigned to patrol until the review is done, and the officers have been advised of this. So what I am saying is that the way we're going to have this deliberate dialogue includes the school district and all of the parties and stakeholders involved there, and including the city and all of our stakeholders and partners also. And we're going to do that with the help of a facilitator and also with a community partner. And Tigard has those folks under contract with the advice of the school district. So there will be a point when city people, meaning council and I and you and the chief and staff, will be invited to be part of that conversation. But it won't be at the very beginning. And the city's involvement and a decision to keep or not the presence of the SROs in our schools will only be made after hearing and considering the voices of everybody who's affected by this service. And that includes students and families, administrators. The district also has security and officers. So what I'm not saying is that any decision has been made to either change or end the presence of school resource officers. We plan to convene a joint meeting of the city councils in Tigard and Tualatin and the school board, so that all of this information that I just talked about can be heard by you, and jointly and through a community dialogue, we can come to a decision about what is right for our district and our community. So we're going to do this thoughtful review, and the school board and we will meet all together to advise us. And I'm expecting the goal and the timeline that is coming together is looking like that'll be at the end of October. So, and the point of the review is to figure out what the role and approach and presence of the officers in the schools should be. So we heard today, or actually while we were meeting, the school district began its community conversation where there are new metrics that just came out that basically has said that the school district is going to need to remain online for the first 9 weeks of school in any event. So in terms of the assignment, I think that the way we've interacted with the district in terms of safety is going to, continue even without an assignment of the SRO right at the beginning of the school year. And I've signed a contract with the facilitator and community partners so that they can help us, and the city will be paying the cost for that facilitation. So more to come. You'll be invited to a facilitated conversation. It's coming soon. And mostly I just wanted you to know the status of that dialogue, and I would welcome your questions.
So City Manager Wine, I just want to clarify as well that a piece to this that I think the public needs to understand too is that there's an annual contract that we sign, or the school district and the city signs to engage in this, and that contract's expired now and not been renewed by the school district, correct? So part of this is that, and again, the expediency of this, given that, I mean, we didn't know for sure until today that school was going to be online for the first 9 weeks, but we had pretty strong indications with the way the public health data and COVID's been going. So that's not like a huge surprise, but it also means that from my perspective, there's no urgency to make a decision in 2 or 3 weeks. Like we have the time to be thoughtful. We should take the time. We've known that. We're going to continue to do that in partnership with all the organizations, the community, et cetera. But I think the contract piece, I think, is an important component to know that we now don't have a contract to provide the service either, and the school district is in the driver's seat on that part.
That's accurate. Thanks for clarifying.
Other questions or comments from the council? Council President Goodhouse?
I was going to add, because I'd heard over this over the weekend where I had a couple of people reach out to me and ask if the program be canceled or what happened. Is there a little bit of just a blurb that the city can throw on social media, so maybe if it's out there that people can understand basically summarize what you just said, and we can kind of do a post, because I think people somehow a rumor got started out there, and if it helps if not many people where I can probably watch this at almost 10 o'clock at night, where we could do a little bit of just a release from the city to explain it, that'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, City Manager Wine, does that conclude your administrative report?
Yes, it does.
Okay, we have no executive session scheduled. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Councilor Lube, I move to adjourn.
Council President Goodhouse, I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
Councilor Newton?
Yes.
Councilor Lube?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
And Mayor Snyder?
Yes. Thank you. We are adjourned. Good work, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everyone.